What's going on, world? Peace and blessings, and welcome to Well Connected. Appreciate you tuning in today. Definitely got a very dope episode in store. Let's get straight into it. Well, as we all know, it is election season. I'm sure right now we're all being inundated with so many ads, content, commercials, spam texts. I'm sure Camilla Harris and Donald Trump are personally texting you, asking you to vote. So much going on, right? And that's why I think it's very important right now that keep our emotions in check, keep our energy together, and more importantly, we stay together as a people. Every election cycle, the Black community, in my opinion, gets our energy exploited as we are a large voting bloc in the Black community and also entire Democratic Party as a whole. And oftentimes we are the people that push over the Democratic Party for their victories in elections. And because of that, the Black community is very much poked and prodded to get out and vote. Now, in my personal opinion, we oftentimes do not get tangible policy, but rather fear mongering, get told that some type of negative element's going to happen. We don't vote, which may be the case, but it's not always the case in my personal opinion. I think oftentimes fear mongering is a more effective strategy that seems to happen, but that's part of politics and that happens with the game. So my view is that the Black community needs to be very strategic about this, and that the Black vote especially, we need to be more progressive with our vote, meaning that we actually need to put intention behind it, meaning it shouldn't just because we were voting to stop some, but rather we're voting for something, right? And I think that's a very important distinction. That's not always the same. And for the Black community, obviously we vote at a very, very high clip for a Democratic Party, right? And right now in our country, things are very, very partisan. Now, I never knock a Black person at all voting Democrat because ultimately, well, the Republican Party doesn't do any true organic outreach on the back end and oftentimes has a lot of negative rhetoric or feelings towards the Black community and issues and problems or things that have plagued us, right? And on the inverse, the Democratic Party will listen to the issues and problems that impact the Black community, give us platforms. Now, does it always turn to legislation or policy to fix it? No, but they do at least talk about it. So ultimately, I can't knock or shame a Black person for voting Democrat. That's why I'll never use derogatory language such as a Democratic plantation, because somehow it implies the Republican Party is a better option. And for myself, even as a political independent, I've been independent since I was 18 years old. I never been a Democrat, never been a Republican, but definitely have voted for individual Democratic candidates, right? So I think it's very important you can have a level-minded perspective on things. You can be independent, meaning that just because you challenge Democratic Party doesn't automatically make you Republican, and just because you challenge Republican Party doesn't automatically make you a Dem or a liberal, right? And things are so partisan right now and split in our country that automatically, again, if you criticize the Dems or the left, that means you're a Republican some else away. Just say you're voting for Trump, or vice versa. You vote or you criticize Republicans, conservatives, and somehow you're a lib and you're a Democratic socialist, right? And so things are so extreme right now, and it's like there has to be more common ground. And for the Black community, I think it's very important that we make sure that we get organic, actual news and information. I think right now for the Black political conscious, it is oftentimes somewhat of a monolith, meaning that the Black community, because we vote for such a high level for a partisan perspective, it's sometimes almost cult-like, meaning that when you go against the view opinion of the Black groupthink, automatically you're ridiculed, you're gaslit, you're shamed, you're bullied, you're fearmonger. Just say you're voting for Trump. Google's free. You don't do research. And all these negative elements that come into it. And it's not very productive because, quite frankly, the Black community is one of the few communities that overwhelmingly vote for one specific partisan party time and time again. And when we don't think differently or have diverse groups of thinking or opinions, you can't have true progress, right? Because that's the good part. It's competition in a sense, right? Because it makes more ideas. It makes people challenge thoughts. It makes more progress happen. And because white supremacy and racism has been a bipartisan product in our country, white supremacy and racism has been a bipartisan product in our country, meaning that legislation and policy, both from the Democrats and Republicans, have hurt and harmed the Black community. Now, obviously, the Republican Party historically in this country has a lot of people who are openly racist and people who are negative towards the Black community. But liberal racism is just as effective, and liberal racism has just as much negative impact to the Black community too. So that's why, for me, I don't see this divisiveness in terms of just feeling one party is truly better than the others, right? But I understand it though, right? And with that being said, I'm like, well, I think oftentimes the Black political conscience is held through a very narrow lens. And I do think the Black elite, I do think there are Black gatekeepers of the political conscience of the Black community, right? These are people who are smart, educated Black people who are, again, professionals, people who work in politics, journalists, people who work in media, sometimes people, entertainers, celebrities, somewhat athletes, people who have some type of connection and influence on the Black community, right? And I think it's good that we have people who update us what's happening politically, but at the same time recognize that it's not always an organic process, and sometimes a very biased opinion we're getting, right? Because many of those Black gatekeepers, I would say, oftentimes are internally still surrogates in connection to the Democratic Party. I mean, a lot of them are actually either paid by the Democratic Party to promote a certain narrative or have a direct affiliation to them as well. And so because of that, you're not truly getting an unbiased perspective and opinion. And I know the contrary belief is that, well, everything Democrat and the left is probably good for the Black community, but that's not always the case. And so when the Black elite, they're putting Black people in a certain position to always make us think a certain way. And when someone goes against it, it automatically presents this cognitive dissonance in the Black community where we have a deferring view and opinion that goes against what we think. So automatically it must be wrong. And many of the Black elite, they oftentimes have adopted an elitist mindset as well, too, meaning that they think that they're better than the rest of the Black community. Because a lot of people are academically gifted, academically experienced, right? They think that they know better than the rest of people, that the Black community isn't able to think on their own, right? And they will sometimes talk down and think if a Black person does have a deferring view or has something that go against the Democratic Party or challenge Democrats, it's automatically, well, you didn't think it out on your own. You're misinformed. This is propaganda. Just say you're voting for Trump. And it's like, no, why can't other Black people develop their own opinions as well, just as much as you formulate your own opinions and views? And because we all have different individual upbringings, have different individual experiences in life that we go through, it can alter our perception, how we see things. But the Black elite keeps such a very, very tight grasp on what's acceptable for the Black community, what's acceptable to be said, and what's acceptable to talk about. And again, they will talk down and think, well, you guys don't really know what's going on, so we're going to educate you. And it's like, well, no, to be fair, you also don't truly know what's going on too, because you're from a very biased perspective. You're not allowed to go against the grain. You're not allowed to challenge leadership if it's not, well, from a deferring view or opinion. And so that's why I think at times it does hinder us. And I think it's very important to understand that the Black gatekeepers and a lot of these Black elite people have started developing a very similar mindset that I call the white moderate. These are the white moderate that Dr. King, Martin Luther King, talked about in his letter from Birmingham jail, right? And it's very important. And I want to examine this for a second, right? Because I think that because of this mindset of thinking we knows best and this isn't the time, it is very similar and distinct to that mindset. So during that time in Birmingham jail, Dr. King responded to a letter he received from the community of white pastors that essentially were saying to him at the time that, hey, we like what you're doing and you're fighting for, a good noble cause, but we don't think the whole, rioting, we don't think the peaceful protesting and where you're going about stuff and kind of, shaking things up is not a right way to go about it. And Dr. King responded in his letter from Birmingham, and I encourage everyone to read his letter. And some things are very apparent he said in there, right? First and foremost, touch about the white moderate as well, too. He said, first, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride towards freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action. They believe they can set a timetable for another man's freedom. They live by this mythological concept of time, who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. And that part right there, especially I agree with the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with the method of your direct action, and this telling the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. See, that's why it's very apparent to me, because the Black elite, I noticed they'll have similar adopted a mindset of basically telling Black people, hey, for any Black person who want to challenge the vote right now, any Black person say, hey, we need tangible policy. Hey, we don't want rappers, or we don't want people, twerking in our face for our votes, or we want to challenging it. it's automatically met with, well, I know you want something different, but this isn't the time. You should do it this way. And it's like, well, no, when is the Black community going to have the time? When are we going to challenge things and actually want tangible legislation and policy? When are we going to go against the grain? And the Black elite are trying to keep Black people kind of at bay and not really rock the shores. And to be fair, when I say Black elite largely get their, I would say, marching orders from white liberals and white Democrats because they count the check for them. And so literally, it's really come from a white liberal, really the white moderate, ultimately, is telling the Black community, hey, do it this way, this manner here. Just as much in Black Lives Matters when it was going on, everything, you still had some white liberals and white moderates still telling Black people, well, you know, change is coming. In Democratic Party, Black people like, hey, we need tangible legislation and policy, and we need things to change now. And Democratic Party was like, okay, well, we're gonna take a knee, some kente cloth. So yeah. And it's like, well, no, that's not what we wanted, right? But they're trying to tell Black people again kind of how to go about this thing, right? And I see that mindset of telling Black people when to chill and how to think, especially Black people right now who kind of fed up with the two-party system and are like, hey, we should maybe think outside the box, right? Or maybe vote a different perspective. And when as gatekeeping is keeping Black people a whole, it's like, well, that's not true progress. That's not different views and opinions and thoughts. And more thinking grows more leadership, right? Leadership should always be challenged. And that's when sometimes I'm very taken back where I see them not wanting Black people to think differently or have a different view and opinion or go about it differently. One thing I respected so much with the Muslim American community was that over the past year, especially going everything on over in the Middle East, Israel and Palestine, you know, they challenged the Biden-Harris administration by saying, hey, you guys need to do something and get some legislation or policy something going on, or we're not going to vote for you. We're not saying we're not going for you at all. We're saying we need something for our vote. They're leveraging the vote. And that's what I wish the Black community would do, just leverage our vote. When we blatantly sign letters and petitions to say, we're voting for Democrat, we're voting for Joe Biden, or we're voting for Kamala Harris by any means necessary. It's like, cool, but you're giving all your leverage away because you're telling them automatically, I'm going to vote for you without needing anything in return and without any reciprocation. And when you're voting to supposedly stop something instead of voting for your interest, that's what happens time and time again. And the Black community ultimately needs to make sure we understand that as a voting bloc, it is not always going to be like this. It is very soon, if you peep the scene, we replace it with a voting bloc. And that's why I think the Black elite keeps Black people at bay, right? Keep us in a victimized mindset sometimes, right? I'll never say pick yourself up by the bootstraps or any of those negative, derogatory statements could ignore the role of systematic white supremacy and racism and legislation and policy, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of Black elite that don't want Black people to truly get progress and truly actually be free, right? And I think about, you know, Booker T. Washington talk about this and kind of warn about a lot of these Negroes who are moving in that regard, right? And I think about as well this famous quote from him. In 1911, he talked about this, how there was a class of colored people who make a business of keeping the troubles, the wrongs, and the hardships of the Negro race before the public. Having learned that they're able to make a living out of their troubles, they have grown into the settled habit of advertising their wrongs, partly because they want sympathy, but partly because it pays. Some of these same people do not want the Negro to lose his grievances because they do not want to lose their jobs. After 100 years, the observation is just as paramount today. The many Black gatekeepers, especially you saw the last several years of Black Lives Matters, some of these activists kind of popped up the woodworks and everything and constantly talking about these oppression stories, constantly talking about these negative things impact the Black community, and kind of fall off and disappear when legislation policy is even brought up, or actually don't present solutions, right? They kind of want us in a constant state of fear. And like I look at, like, you know, we went through the whole Black Lives Matters movement and defund the police and criminal justice reform, and that was part of the sentiment of voting for President Biden, right? And we did that. You got Democrats in charge, and all that went away. So no one talked about it no more. In fact, Joe Biden came out saying, "Oh, the issue actually is defund the police, and he's militarizing the police even more now." And I'm like, why are we not challenging this? We're not challenging it because right now something actually could be done. And a lot of people don't actually want something to be done because what would they complain about? What would their issue be, right? There always has to be a negative element for them to stay actually relevant. Be conscious of people and Black content creators and people who only have relevancy when a Black person dies or a Black person goes through something negative happens. If you don't see many at a time, it's very telling and very paramount about what they truly want. And so there's a lot of Black people, I feel like, who are trying to keep us in a state of victimization and oppression because it requires you to need others, requires you need the government requires needs. Well, the Democratic Party, who's a large time extension of the government, right? So it goes back to, this is not biased. It's not unbiased opinion. Oftentimes we're getting is very biased, and it's trying to push Black people towards a certain direction. And that's what the Black gatekeepers do. I saw last week, Sway Lee was criticized and challenged because he told people to look at Kamala Harris's, history. And it's like, okay, you can challenge him and say he's a rapper or something, opinion. But at the same time, every day Plies is online and he gets thousands of retweets and stuff for saying CNN and MSNBC talking points and liberal talking points all day. It's not intellectual. He's just repeating, regurgitating the same information. Like Kamala Harris brought Quavo and Megan Thee Stallion out there today, and telling Quavo can talk about politics, and Sway Lee can't. Really? I mean, I don't want anyone to talk about politics, in my personal opinion, at least representing us, because I think they're still part of a class of people who don't directly have a true understanding of what's happening right now. They're still influenced, right? Same way Amber Rose spoke at the RNC convention was because they're trying to utilize her for some votes. And I say it respectfully, it's no different from Taraji B. Henson at the BET Wars telling Black people to get out and vote and stuff or anything, right? For the Democratic Party, having a call with Kamala Harris. They're still surrogates, right? Now, granted, I get it. Black people Democrat. I understand that part. But it's still ultimately still being influenced, right? So I want Black people aware of that. And one last point I make today is third-party voting, right? Oftentimes we get shamed and to think, oh, well, third-party people don't matter. You shouldn't vote third-party because they're never going to win. It's a waste of a vote, or a third-party vote is a vote for Trump. And that part's not true. And I want to actually really talk about that right now, because specifically in this last election, that was a big talking point to shame people from not voting Democrat, right? And interesting enough as well, without third parties, Trump wins again. Without third party, Joe Biden's not winning that election. And actually, we see here, especially with Joe Jurgensen in the 2020 election, a libertarian candidate, without her, definitely Trump wins, because she was able to take votes away from Trump, actually, to attribute to Joe Biden's winning, especially in major swing states. Typically, right, third-party voters are probably going to be more conservative Republicans or independents or moderates, right? It's not usually liberal Democrats vote third-party per se, and especially for the Libertarian Party. And in many swing states, the Libertarian candidate, Joe Jurgensen, had more vote total than the margin difference between Trump and Biden, meaning that she had more votes than the difference between Trump and Biden here. And that was able to actually help Joe Biden out, because many of the votes that would have maybe gone to Trump, she took away and was able to push Biden to the finish line. And so, interesting enough, as we are shaming people vote third party or having a different view or opinion, or they can't win, or vote for third party, vote for Trump. No, that's gaslighting propaganda, because the data statistics show, in fact, third party actually was the only reason Joe Biden won the last election. So keep that in mind this year when you're going back around, maybe shame people for want to have a different view and opinion or not want to vote Democrat. Because my personal opinion, our ancestors fought and sacrificed for us to have the choice to vote. If you don't think a candidate represents you or don't have an actual issue or policy for you, you don't have to vote for them. Like, it is, I'll say that's simple, but you have that right. Again, I'm political independent. I'm independent from 18 years old, so I understand both sides of the aisle in terms of understanding that both parties have issues and problems going on within them, and it's okay to express yourself. Because my ancestors, quite frankly, if I think both candidates are white supremacists or both candidates don't represent the Black community, I'm not going to vote for them. Someone has some type of policy for us. And so keep that in mind this year, especially in the ballot. You got Cornel West on there as well, Dr. Cornel West. It's a Black man on the ballot. Again, it could also, more likely help out potentially. So just keep that in mind, but that's my opinion, right? You can still vote if you want to vote, but need something for your ballot. Need something for your vote. I say this with the Black elite. Look, where my perspective's coming from, because I know them. I'm a third generation HBCU graduate. I'm a third generation master degree holder. I'm a former president of Jack and Jill America chapter. Like, I know the Black elite. I seen y'all. And that's why this rhetoric, where they talk down the Black community, where they gatekeep and stuff and everything, I'm seeing from personal perspective. I go to Congressional Black Caucus every single year at the convention. I'm going to go again this year. Great experience. Love being around so many successful, legit Black people. But often I see that elitism and how it can separate themselves and how they can maybe talk down and see themselves in the Black community. If we look what happened, especially with the whole black job fiasco, right? How many people were flexing and Black people saying, illegal immigrants aren't taking my job. You saw many people who were, Black professionals who are doctors and lawyers and teachers and educators and legislators and media members, and a lot of people who have jobs that require degrees or a higher barrier to entry. Your jobs are never going to be taken by anybody, right? It's not going to be taken by any illegal immigrants or anything like that. But that's not the reality of most Black Americans. Only 27% of Black Americans have a college degree, which means 73% of Black Americans do not. Which means 70% of Black Americans do not work high-level jobs or require degrees, right? So many Black Americans do work low level, lower skill jobs, right? Historically, whether it's from construction, whether it's from working in house cleaning, right? Whether it's doing things that are manual labor or stuff that require, again, a low skill element. And that's due to lack of opportunities for education, systematic white supremacy and racism, disparities, inequities, and money and financial elements that have trickled in the reason why we don't have the same opportunities. But that's the reality, though, right? Many Black people are really blue collar workers and stuff like that, and have to work multiple jobs, especially labor jobs. The reality is that many illegal immigrants coming in, which, by the way, there's lots of xenophobia that goes into that as well. I would say illegal immigrants and migrants are people, they're brothers, they're sisters, they're humans. They should be treated with respect, not like animals or any negative derogatory element. But the reality is, still, they definitely negatively impact the Black community, because ultimately, capitalism is the issue and problem. Because if a business or construction people have to choose between paying a Black American who ultimately still a citizen, have minimum wage, they still have to pay us, or a legal immigrant, we can pay them next to nothing on the dollar. Well, ultimately, because of capitalism, we're going to pay the person next to nothing on the dollar, right, to save money. Capitalism ultimately is the problem, but we live in a capitalist society, and it's still like, well, legal immigration still impacts hurts the Black community, especially the way moving forward, where people are trying to grant citizenship and things like that. Understand, man, this is coming into the Black voting and working class. We are the ones who will be impacted by that. So the people who oftentimes complain about illegal immigrants, they took our jobs, they're just xenophobic and racist, don't want them in our country. But reality, Black American, Black working class Americans, you are the ones actually being impacted by that. But again, the Black elite, sometimes so disconnected from the rest of the Black community and the issues and problems, that they have such a very naive mindset, and we'll talk down those points. But reality is, no, that is something we should actually be conscious of and aware of, right? That's a issue that's very pro-Democrat issue, but then necessarily goes aligned with the Black community. So that's why I want us to kind of be conscious aware of those things, right? And just kind of make sure you challenge leadership. Leadership should always be challenged, because that's the only way you get better. Having diverse opinions and views is the only way that you can grow a society and group. Keep everything echo chambered up is not the way. And for the Black community, there's so many issues and problems that plague us that are not going to change from the president, to be honest with you. And that's why it's very important for us to understand local election. Get out and vote for sure. Okay. But look at your local election, look what's on the ballot, look on your state legislation and what's happening there, because that's where change is going to come. But oftentimes the Black elite doesn't really talk about that, because the Democratic Party wants them to stay on par with, well, who they want to push out there in a narrative. And again, you can vote how you want to vote. This is not to push you right. Just because I'm criticizing or being objective with the Democratic Party doesn't mean I'm a Republican. I'm not going to vote for Trump. I may should probably start by saying that 10 times. I did not vote for Trump in 2016, 2020, or 2024. Okay? So there you go. That's why I want us to also understand, though, as well, you can still be critical of everybody, right? And critique, because that's how it'll get better. And I want us to eat. I want us to win. I want us not to be exploited. I want the best for the Black community. So with that being said, always challenge leadership. Stay tuned to Black elite. Make sure that they are not gaslighting, bullying you, or shaming you into any type of decision making that you don't agree with, or a certain mindset, because we can't move as a hive mindset. We can't be fastest. We can't just push people away. That will never grow a society. We're too unique. We're too powerful, and we're too able to ambitious to keep rolling with this country. I love Black people, but we got to do better. We got to keep challenging leadership. And sometimes it may not be popular. Sometimes it may get pushback. I'm sure right now the Black elite may have seen this, is going to push back at me and call me names, X, Y, and Z. But I'm telling you, I know y'all. I'm going to see y'all again. CBC this year, Congressional Black Caucus. I'm going to pull up on y'all. I'll be down there. So stay tuned to that. Hey, appreciate you tuning in today. Make sure you stay blessed. Make sure you stay safe. And more importantly, make sure you stay connected. Peace.